Welcome to This Week in Health IT events, where we amplify great thinking with interviews from the floor. Well, there is going to be no floor this year for HIMSS 2020, but we're going to go ahead and push ahead with a bunch of interviews we had scheduled anyway. Special thanks to our channel sponsors, Starbridge Advisors, HealthLyrics, Galen Healthcare, VMware, and ProTalent Advisors for choosing to invest in our show. My name is Bill Russell, Healthcare CIO coach and creator of This Week in Health IT, a set of podcast videos and collaboration events dedicated to developing the next generation of health leaders. If you're not familiar with our show, throughout the year we do a new show every Tuesday News Day, where we take a look at the news that's going to impact health IT. And every Friday we do an interview with an industry influencer. A couple times a year we forego this pattern to cover events. This Week Health events are shorter interviews conducted from the floor. We drop a bunch of these episodes during the event week and let you pull up the ones that you find most interesting. Even though Chime and HIMSS are not going to be going on this week, we're going to be honoring our interview requests, and we will be bringing you a bunch of shows. So we're going to be dropping a bunch of shows this week. This Week Health Events literally has as its mission to bring the event to those who are unable to attend. And this year, that just happens to be everyone. Our first interview is with Joe Petro, the CTO of Nuance. We visited with Joe last year in the booth, and he introduced us to a lot of concepts that they were working on around ambient clinical intelligence. And it was really exciting. I thought it was one of the best presentations at the show last year. And so we decided to catch up with Joe again this year to see what kind of progress they've been making on ACI and to explore some of the other topics. They've done some partnerships with Microsoft and others. And so we're going to talk about those things. So here is our first HIMSS interview for HIMSS 2020. Hope you enjoy.
Today we're joined by Joe Petro, CTO for Nuance out of Boston. Joe, this is your second time on the show. Welcome back.
Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Last year was really exciting. We met at HIMSS, and Voice. You guys were showing off the ambient clinical intelligence and listening in your booth, and I thought it was one of the most exciting things that was going on at the show. Give us an idea of, let's start with, what will you be showcasing this year at HIMSS?
Yeah, sure. At this point, we're still being a little bit vague on it for obvious competitive reasons. But, at a high level, we're basically showing the next generation of that demonstration that you actually saw last year. So we're coming out with a generally available version of the product here in the next month or so. And so that's what we'll be showcasing. It's going to be, at a super, super high level. It's going to be a lot less structured, a lot more real world. The audience is going to participate a little bit. So it's exciting.
Voice clinical in the patient room seems to be sort of the hottest thing going. Talk about what you've learned over the past year. So you've put it out there in pilots.
Yep.
And what are you learning, or what are you finding as people start to interact with the technology?
Yeah, we've got a number of clients that I would call early adopters at this point, and I think what we're basically learning is that this is spot on in terms of hitting the center of gravity of the pain point that physicians are feeling. What this whole thing, what ACI is really targeted at, is attempting to remove the screen between the patient and the physician. And for a long time now, with Dragon Medical One, we've always said we turn the chair around. There's this famous crayon drawing that's been in JAMA, which a little girl actually drew of her sister who was very sick, and she drew a picture of her sister kind of sitting on the exam table, and her mom and her other sibling sitting next to her, but with the physician turned around, sitting in a chair, typing on a computer. And that's really what this is targeted at. We're trying to continuing to turn the chair around, kind of extending on the Dragon Medical One proposition of relieving physician burden, and trying to bring back some of that joy of care to the physician, and also from a patient point of view, improve the experience for ourselves as well. So that's fundamentally what it's targeted at, and it seems to be spot on. And it's been overwhelmingly positive, the feedback that we've gotten from the physicians that are on the system.
Are you learning anything in regards to, Dragon Medical One is, microphone pretty close to the physician, generally in a quiet area. But when you're doing this in sort of a room setting, you're probably learning, I would assume, a ton of things in terms of positioning the microphones, picking up the video, picking up visual cues, and those kind of things. Are you learning anything in those areas?
Yeah, there's a number of kind of mundane things that it's just important to kind of work through it. You know, as we kind of learn the ropes. Of course, it's a noisy environment, so we're pushing the state of the art in terms of what we call signal enhancement and noise filtering. And we've leveraged technology that we brought over from our other divisions. You know, some people don't realize it, but you know, Nuance has been in the automotive space for a long time. If you've got a car and you're talking to it, the odds are you're probably talking to Nuance. We're in 65% of the vehicles out there, and that technology has allowed us to really advance the state of the art in terms of signal enhancement and noise filtering because of road noise as well as wind noise as well as kind of inter-party noise where you've got kids in the background kind of yelling and so forth, and you're trying to control your car. So we always expected that was going to be a challenge because it's a noisy environment. It's a multi-party environment. You know, you have a doctor, you could have a number of nurses, you could have a number of family members. So that's kind of stuff that we actually expected. There's some more mundane things like, you know, one, how we actually have the patient opt into the experience is important. You know, that what happens is this is fully disclosed to the patient so that the patient understands what's going on and they understand how this is actually going to help their experience. So how you do that, you know, what forms you put in front of them, you know, what signatures you get from them and how you actually explain it. There's kind of an art form to that, of course. That rests largely on our clients, not so much on Nuance, but that's an important step because with all the crazy stuff that's going out there in terms of privacy and so forth, we want to be very, very clean on that. So we've learned a lot there. And our opt-in rates are still very, very high, which is awesome because that's what we wanted it to be because we do really, truly believe this is going to be good for everybody. There's other little things like there are times during the episode of care where you don't want the machine listening. It might be a very intimate conversation that's going on between the patient and the physician, and the patient might say something like, you know, can we shut this down for a minute? I need to talk to you about something. And then how, you know, you kind of maintain the context of that. So when you come back in, simple stuff like how do you make sure that all of these various kind of snippets of, you know, audio and so forth are kind of stitched together. Seems like a simple, mundane problem, but, you know, doing that in a way that, you know, maintains the continuity of the dialogue so that we can make sense of it. You know, little things like that. But there haven't been a lot of, you know, very big discoveries. This is a hard problem. We know it's hard. We kind of walked into it knowing it's hard, and the problem has been actually nicely yielding, you know, over the course of the last year.
Yeah, you know what I'm hearing in the industry. I mean, people are ecstatic about Dragon Medical One. The people who are using it, you know, cloud-based solution. The physicians are figuring it out. It really has moved pretty far along pretty rapidly compared to what I was looking at maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm hearing really good things. Your accuracy rates on that are, at least I think they are hovering in the high 90s, 96, 7, 8%. Are you able to get those same kind of accuracy rates in the you know, the ambient clinical environments?
Yeah. So let me just explain. So the answer is no, not yet. And this is part of the problem yielding to us. But let me kind of explain how we're creeping up on this. So I joined Nuance about 12 years ago or so, and when I got here, the out-of-the-box accuracy on Dragon was okay. It was like 88, 89%. But the fact is that, you know, 88, 89%, that's still 1 in 10 words, you know, that you need to correct. So even though it would be a good grade on a test maybe if you're in college, not such a good grade if you're streaming speech, right? And there is no scale here like there is in college. And over the years, we made that yield at what we call 15% relative word error rate per year. We basically chipped away at the problem. And now, as you say, it's extraordinarily high. Basically, we've reached a level of what we call human agreement, which fundamentally means that if we have a human being listening to the conversation and we have the speech engine listening to the conversation, the speech engine and the human are going to agree in terms of what they heard. ACI is somewhat of a different beast. Number one, it's conversational in nature. So it's sloppy the way humans are sloppy in terms of the way we speak back and forth to each other in conversation, versus if you look at Dragon Medical One is a very controlled, formalized form of clinical documentation delivery. So physicians tend to speak in complete sentences, complete thoughts. You know, they're trying to do like a SOAP note. They're trying to do a progress note. They know, and they're kind of pre-contemplating and premeditating what they say. And so, you know, patient presents with complaints of severe headache. Patient is on 150 milligrams of XYZ. Patient has history of headache. Basically a very kind of formalized, prescriptive type of a speech. But when we're talking back and forth, if you're the physician and I'm the patient, it's sloppy. We're talking about the kids. We're talking about the kids' games. We're talking about, you know, the score of the last football game. We're talking about some ache in my knee. It's very sloppy. It's back and forth. There's a lot of oohs and ahs. By its very nature, conversational speech has a lower level of accuracy than that formal speech. That's one step kind of down in terms of accuracy level. Then we have to diarize the speech. So you have to take what you said and what I said and separate it so that you can track both of those kind of threads. And that is what you apply the speech to text to. You apply it to the patient thread, you apply it to the physician thread, or multiple physicians and possible family members. There's another accuracy rate that applies to that. And then once you turn it into text, you start to harvest it for information so that you can summarize it, because that's what ambient clinical intelligence does. It summarizes the conversation into clinical documentation that gets embodied in the EMR. There's another level of accuracy there. So the challenge with ACI is you might be multiplying several high accuracies together, but there's this inertia or this pull towards a lower level of accuracy. So the question is, what level of accuracy do we need inside of ACI so that the physician accepts the result and they just want to edit it? Okay, so it's easier for this thing to listen, and then for the physician to look at the summarized result and actually edit it. Will they be willing to do that? That's a tipping point, and we discovered this tipping point in the old days with transcription because, you know, we went on this journey where transcriptionists were involved. They would do the typing for physicians. And even with transcriptionists, we knew we had to get to a certain level of accuracy. The magic number with a transcriptionist, we're kind of a relatively lower paid person, lower paid knowledge worker than the physician, happened to be 85%. Once we got to 85%, it was a lot faster to edit it than it was to type it, even though it was 15 words to 100. And what we learned in that process is we learned that formatting the document was actually far more important than the speech accuracy. And then as speech started getting higher and higher and higher, then we flipped it over to the physician, and when we kind of hit that trigger point of 88, 89, 90, physicians started wanting to edit. We don't know yet because we don't have any experience. We have a bunch of opinions because we're highly experienced in this field. We don't really know yet where that trigger point is, and that is what we're basically working on. But the problem's yielding nicely from a technical point of view. Accuracies are continuing to go up. You know, we're not hitting any blocking points at this point in time. So it's really, really exciting, and we're kind of looking forward to going through the same type of journey.
And I appreciate you going into that level of detail. As you know, the listeners for this show are primarily health IT professionals, and that's the level of detail they really want to understand, because the hype around this is amazing. And you guys are tackling the hardest area to tackle. And, you know, so people are saying, hey, you know, we could put a Amazon Echo in the patient room and we get this. Yeah, but you're just asking for a blanket or asking for a nurse to come up. That's a completely different level of accuracy that's required and risk tolerance, quite frankly, that's going on. So you guys signed you made an announcement with Microsoft earlier this year. Is that about tapping into AI capabilities, or what is that about?
Yeah, that's a super exciting opportunity for us. So just to tell you a little bit about the history, Microsoft approached us like 2.5 years ago at HIMSS, and a guy named Peter Lee, who runs their healthcare business, had approached us, and they came to me and they were talking about like different ways that we could work together. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, whenever kind of a big platform player approaches you, you're not exactly sure why, and you're a little bit skeptical. And so we had a healthy level of skepticism in the early days. But what ended up happening, just to kind of fast forward through a multi-year journey, we started to realize that Peter's team and Microsoft legitimately we're trying to get into the business of improving the situation in healthcare and really improving the situation with the physician in particular. And we talk about all different kinds of ways that we could potentially work together. We've got something called the AI Marketplace, which is a diagnostic and radiology solution. We do some image processing. We've gotten an AI image algorithms for the detection of certain disease conditions and so forth. So we looked at a whole bunch of stuff, but we kept coming back to the ACI problem because they had a project called Empower MB, which was similar to ACI, a little bit different, but the spirit of it was right. We started to realize they're thinking about the problem the same way we are, and we realized that if we could create a partnership that was a legitimate partnership, it wasn't just some kind of like quote unquote Azure licensing deal, that this could be really good for us because it could help us accelerate our ACI efforts, but it could also get Microsoft into the market as well the way they desired. And so this kind of spiritual alignment between the two companies and the somewhat friendships we developed with Peter's team, that's the thing that kind of fueled it. And so what the partnership is all about is it's about bringing the net horsepower of Microsoft and the way we think about Microsoft as an enterprise class R&D company and solutions company, bringing the full horsepower of them in terms of AI, their research, all the various things they have available in the market as well as privately, marrying that up with the Nuance experiences and history in terms of clinical documentation expertise, our partnerships with the EMRs and so forth, and attempting to accelerate the ACI problem. So as you might imagine, this is a very complex and difficult deal to contemplate and think about for two, companies like ours that both own our territories, but we got through all that. It had support all the way at the very top, CEO level at Microsoft, as well as the CEO level on our side. So it was hard to do, but we think it's very much going to be worth it, and it will help accelerate us.
Yeah, and I think that's the most exciting thing because the expectation on voice and really conversational technologies is that you're going to alleviate the clinician burnout and the clinician problem. I checked my 87-year-old father-in-law into a hospital last night, and there was literally in the we started in the ED, and there was literally a person dedicated to the keyboard. They were sitting in front of Epic. They were doing all their stuff, and then nurses and doctors came in and out. And I after a while, I just said to her, I'm like, hey, if you don't mind me asking, what's your level? And she's a nurse practitioner, but she really hardly ever left the keyboard because it was required. I mean, somebody had to put all this information in, and there was no other way to get the information in. So the acceleration of this is really important. And last year we talked about, you're doing this in orthopedics, but in order to accelerate this, you almost need new vocabularies to move forward. Are we going to be able to accelerate this over the next 12 to 18 months, or is this going to be more of a 5 to 6 year journey kind of thing?
Yeah, and this is where I could easily fall into the hype cycle, so I won't do that. The reality is this problem is going to yield over time, and I think it's going to yield in pieces, right? So the way we're doing it is we've already got over 1.5 million cases of care in our AI training library, and that spans 5 different specialties. So we talked about ortho last year. We're also attacking, I'm just reading off a list here, podiatry, dermatology, ears, nose, and throat, as well as ophthalmology. Those will all come out the early part of this year, so we'll have support for those specialties inside the ACI footprint. And as I said, please come to the booth when you're at HIMSS. That's an open invitation to anybody that's interested, and they can take a look at actually what we're doing there. And then over late 2019 and 2020s, we're attacking the remainder of the 18 specialties, and they'll be coming out at a clip of 1 to 2 per month over that period of time. So I think the data collection piece of it, for us at least, because we know how to do this, we've been doing this for a long time, it's kind of the easier part of it. The vocabulary part of it is also the easier part of it. The hard part about this is you need to be an expert in each one of these specialties. Like, so for example, I just did one of these executive physicals a short time ago, and I went through several different care settings. So I dealt with a dermatologist, I dealt with an ophthalmologist, I dealt with a general care person, cardiologist, etc. And if you look at their notes and you look at the way they behave in the treatment room or the exam room, everyone is different. Like the ophthalmologist hardly said anything to me, right? So they were just doing measurements. They have the thing on your face and they're making the adjustments. They're looking in your eyes and so forth. He really didn't say anything until the very end, and he barely summarized it. I mean, he didn't summarize the measurements for me, so he barely verbalized it. So the ACI experience in the ophthalmology setting and what we capture is going to be different than, say, the dermatology setting. When I was in dermatology, this physician actually had a scribe. The scribe walked in, and she sat behind a curtain at the back of the room, and the ophthalmologist came up and examined me, and everything he pointed to on my body and on my skin, he described it. He described it in dermatological terms, but he also summarized it for me in kind of layman's terms so I understood what was going on and whether I should be worried or not. And each one of those care settings was different. So the finesse here, or the speckmanship or the art form to this, is going to be each one of these specialties we encounter, trying to figure out what has to be in that summarized document, what has to go from the summarized document to the electronic medical record. And so in that respect, it's brand new territory, and that this is where the subject matter expertise and the specialties come, and this is kind of how we're chipping away at it.
Joe, I know we're at the end of our time. Can I have one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Last question is, we've focused a lot on storing the information in the EHR. Are we starting to look at storing the information elsewhere and making it available for research and looking at training and those kinds of things in other technologies, data technologies? Yeah,
there are companies that are looking at that. We tend to operate in a very, very narrow band around the usage of data. We take a very conservative approach. We've basically labeled ourselves as stewards and custodians of the data, and we have a very clear conversation with our clients that we're borrowing the data for a short period of time so that we can train our model, so that we can deliver a very specific service back to you. We're not going to derive value from the data. We're not going to try to resell the data. We're not going to try to build products that you're not aware of. So we have something in our contracts called the data usage clause that really, really limits our scope. With that said, there's a lot going on out there. Some of it a little spooky, as consumers, just in terms of the way our data is used and our health data is used. It's not making me very, very comfortable. And I think there are companies that are starting to, get into the business of potentially having secondary monetization of healthcare data. And so that's an interesting space. I think, if a company tries to crack it, it'll probably end up being a partnership with one of these, big IDNs or whatever, trying to come up with a way to, anonymize the data and then create kind of a honeypot type of a resource for AI training. That is not the business, that we're in, and we've kind of intentionally tried to stay away from that. The other thing is that the EMR for us is very central. And it makes our world go round, so we have a very open relationship with the EMR, and we try to push everything back to them.
Joe, thanks for your time. I will. I'll look forward to stopping by the booth at HIMSS. I will likely air this prior to the HIMSS show so that people will get a feel for what you guys are going to show, even though you were kind of cryptic with us early on. But I understand the marketing aspect of that.
I've got people standing over here off camera, by the way, that would have attacked me if I shared too much, so I got to be careful.
I understand. Thanks again. I look forward to seeing you at HIMSS.
All right. Thanks, man. We'll see you soon.
I really want to thank Joe and the team from Nuance for making him available for this interview. A lot of great things going on in voice, conversational technologies, AI, and it's exciting to hear how focused they are on making that a reality. We want to thank our founding channel sponsors who make this content possible: HealthLyrics, Galen Healthcare, Starbridge Advisors, VMware, and ProTalent Advisors. If you want to be a part of our mission to develop health leaders, go to thisweekhealth.com/sponsor for more information. If you want to reach me, you can always shoot me an email at bill@thisweekhealthit.com. I love your feedback on the show. A couple of you have sent ideas for future shows, people I should interview, and those kind of things. Keep the feedback coming. It is extremely helpful. This show is a production of This Week in Health IT. For more great content, you check out our website, thisweekhealth.com, or the YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.